Mrs. Nancy, it's right here. Room 145 at the end of the hallway. I looked at the dark wooden door in front of me. It was different from the others on the same floor. Narrower, simpler, with a number plate that seemed to have been recently replaced. Across the hallway, the rooms had double doors and golden numbers. I swallowed hard and opened my purse, searching for the key card. "Are you going to be okay here, ma'am? Can I help you with anything else?" asked the bellhop, a young boy with an impeccable uniform, who looked at me with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Yes, I will, son. Don't worry." I smiled, trying to hide the knot growing in my throat. Before I continue, tell me in the comments which city you're listening to my story from, and if you've ever experienced something similar. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support is essential for me not to go through this alone, as I no longer have anyone to confide in. My hand trembled slightly as I swiped the card. The green light flashed and I entered. It was an adapted service room, a small window, a narrow twin bed, a minimal closet. None of the Egyptian organic cotton sheets that I myself had selected for the suites. None of the lavender and lemongrass sent from the artisanal diffusers I had ordered from small producers in Vermont. Just a simple, functional, and completely impersonal room. I sat on the edge of the bed, which sank more than it should. I would have to talk to Paul about maintaining the mattresses in these rooms. Nobody deserved to sleep on a bed like that, not even guests who booked the most economical accommodations. I took a deep breath and let out a sad laugh. It was impressive how my own children had no idea who I really was. After 20 years away, I was nothing more than a retired lady who worked in hospitality, as they said with that slightly condescending tone. Room 145 of the Pine Valley Boutique Hotel in Oak Ridge, the crown jewel of my hotel chain, the property I loved the most. And here I was, staying like an intruder in my own dream. The family trip my children organized was supposed to be an attempt to reconnect after so many years. In reality, I was only invited because my sister, Irene, who was on the original list, had an arthritis flare-up and couldn't come. I discovered this by accident when my niece Caitlin let it slip during a phone call. "Oh, Aunt Nancy, I'm glad you agreed to come. We would have had an extra reservation after Aunt Irene canceled." A brief, awkward silence, and she tried to fix it. "I mean, we were going to invite you anyway, of course." But I knew the truth. At 63, you learn to distinguish sincere kindness from social obligations. Still, I accepted, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of hope, or perhaps just out of weariness of keeping my distance from the only family I had left. I opened my small suitcase and started putting away my clothes. I brought only simple pieces: linen pants, cotton blouses, a cardigan for the cool mountain evenings. None of the silk dresses or Italian cashmere that filled my closet in Boston. Nothing that would indicate that I, Nancy Oliver, the aunt, who cleaned hotel rooms, was now the owner of a luxury hotel chain worth millions. My cell phone rang. It was my oldest son, Richard. "Mom, we're all gathered in the lobby. Have you settled in?" "Yes, son. I'll be down in a few minutes." "Did you find the right room? Julie said it's a bit hard to locate." "Julie, my daughter-in-law. She was the one who made the reservations and assigned the rooms. She and Richard got the Pine Suite, the most luxurious in the hotel, with a panoramic view of the mountains. My younger son, Edward, and his wife Patricia were in the Oak Suite, almost as impressive as the first. The nephews were in luxury rooms, and me? In the former room we used for staff in training, recently converted for budget accommodation. Yes, I did. It's a cozy room. Good. We got what fit in the budget, you know how it is. He laughed, unconcerned. "Come down soon. We're having drinks before dinner." I hung up and stared at the wall for a few minutes. The Richard I once knew would never speak to his mother like that. I remembered the sensitive boy who cried when he saw injured birds, who hugged me tight when his father drank too much and yelled at us. Where was that Richard? Lost somewhere between corporate promotions and business dinners, replaced by this man who measured people's worth by the size of their bank accounts. I took a deep breath and looked at myself in the small bathroom mirror. My face showed signs of age, but my eyes still held the strength of the woman who faced the world alone after Anthony's death. I remembered my husband with affection every day. We started washing dishes and cleaning rooms in a small hostel in Cape Cod. He in maintenance, me in housekeeping. With time, savings, and a lot of sweat, we bought our first establishment. When he died, 12 years ago, we already had 3 properties. Today there were 8 spread across the country. I applied a subtle lipstick, arranged my gray hair in a simple bun, and went down to meet my family. The lobby of Pine Valley was my pride. Reclaimed wood flooring, stone fireplace, soft leather armchairs, and an immense chandelier made from twisted branches collected from the mountains themselves. The decor blended rustic with refined, exactly as I had imagined. Paul, the manager, saw me coming down the stairs and almost let a smile of recognition escape, but he maintained the professional discretion I always demanded. Just an almost imperceptible nod. Our agreement was in place. For all intents and purposes, I was just another guest. "Mom, finally!" Edward waved from one of the sofas near the fireplace. My youngest was chubbier now, his round face framed by a well-trimmed beard. Beside him, Patricia, my younger daughter-in-law, looked at me with that polite smile that never reached her eyes. I approached and was greeted with quick kisses and formal hugs. 7 adults and 3 teenagers made up our small family reunion. My 2 sons and their wives, my niece Caitlin and her husband Alex, their son Brian, a quiet 16-year-old boy with a camera hanging around his neck, and Edward and Patricia's 15-year-old twins, Lucas and Megan, absorbed in their cell phones. "Aunt Nancy, it's so good to see you." Caitlin stood up to hug me, a bit warmer than the others. "Do you like the hotel? It's beautiful, isn't it?" "Very beautiful indeed," I replied, holding back the urge to say that every detail of that place had my signature. "We were lucky to get reservations here," Alex commented, swirling a glass of red wine. "The price was outrageous, but I managed to get a corporate discount. I have contacts in the hotel industry." I smiled inwardly. The corporate discount was a courtesy we offered to partner companies. Alex worked for a construction firm that had renovated the spa at one of my hotels in Aspen. If he only knew that his connection was, in fact, with me. "And how's your room, Mom?" Richard asked, signaling for the waiter to bring another glass. "It's different from what I imagined, but it's fine." It was what we could get. "These places are super expensive," Julie intervened, adjusting her pearl necklace. "You understand, right? You worked in this industry. You must know how they exploit customers." I bit my lip to avoid responding. If she knew how many hours of research and financial planning I dedicated to ensuring our prices were fair, considering the quality offered. "Are your rooms comfortable?" I asked, slightly changing the subject. "Wonderful!" Patricia exclaimed. "Ours has a huge jacuzzi. Ed even took a picture to show the people at his office." Edward laughed, embarrassed. "The view is sensational, Mom. You can see the entire mountain range. Worth every penny. Every penny I invested to build that wing of the hotel, after countless nights poring over plans and budgets. Every penny that came out of my pocket to bring those designer furniture pieces from Italy. Every penny they thought I didn't have." "Amigas. Glad you're enjoying it," was all I could say. The conversation flowed around superficial topics. Work, investments, the latest international trips. Occasionally, someone would direct a polite question to me about how my life in Boston was going, but quickly the attention would turn to more interesting topics. I observed my grandchildren discreetly. Edward's twins barely looked up from their phones. Brian, Caitlin's son, seemed out of place. Every now and then, he would pick up his camera and photograph details of the environment, the play of light on the stone wall, the arrangement of native flowers on the center table, the dancing flames in the fireplace. "Brian, enough with those photos," Alex reprimanded. "Talk to people." The boy lowered his camera, embarrassed. "Sorry, Dad. It's just that the light here is incredible." "Light doesn't pay for college, son," Alex responded dryly. "We've already talked about this fixation with photography." I saw the boy's face, close up. Something in that scene deeply affected me. How many times had I heard similar phrases when I talked about my dreams of having my own business? Dreams don't fill stomachs, Nancy. Stop being silly, girl. People like us don't become entrepreneurs. Maybe it was time to start changing that story, not just mine, but that of the entire family who barely knew me. And you? What would you do if you saw your own children and grandchildren judging you without even knowing who you really are? As the waiter served another round of drinks, I made a decision. I would keep my identity secret for now, but I wouldn't stay quiet. This week at Pine Valley would be more revealing than any of them could imagine. Dinner was served in the main restaurant, overlooking the valley, illuminated by the lights of the small town below. Michael, the chef I personally hired 3 years ago, prepared a tasting menu with local ingredients: trout, mushrooms, fresh herbs harvested from our organic garden. Each dish was a work of art, served on ceramic dishes, made by artisans from a nearby town. While everyone marveled at the food, I focused on details that only the owner would notice. Richard's glass had a tiny chip on the rim. One of the pendant lights was slightly dimmer than the others. One of the new waiters was serving from the right, not the left as we required. Mentally but discreetly, I made notes to discuss with Paul the next day. "The food here is incredible," Patricia commented, photographing her plate before each bite. "I'm going to post this on Instagram. My friends will be so jealous." "I don't know if it's worth the price we're paying." Alex poked a mushroom with his fork. "In Boston, we eat at better places for half the price." I took a deep breath. If he knew how much it cost to bring organic products from small producers, pay fair, wages, maintain quality, and yet our prices were average for boutique mountain hotels. I personally conducted this market research regularly. "I think it's delicious," I said, savoring the wild mushroom risottos that Michael had perfected after 3 months of testing. "And the atmosphere is wonderful, worth every penny." Julie raised an eyebrow, surprised by my statement. "Well, you're not paying, so it's easy for you to say that." She laughed, as if she had made an innocent joke. Edward choked on his wine, embarrassed. "Julie, please." "What?" She shrugged. "I'm just joking. Auntie knows we're happy to have her with us. It's just that, well, these places are really expensive." The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by Brian, who turned to me with genuine interest. "Grandma Nancy, you worked in hotels, right? What do you think of this one, as a professional?" I smiled at him, grateful for the change of subject and for the first sincere question of the night. "I did work for many years, yes," I replied, carefully choosing my words. "This hotel has a very strong identity. You can tell it was planned with care, not just as a business. You cleaned rooms, right?" Megan, my 15-year-old granddaughter, finally looked away from her phone with a curiosity that bordered on teenage disdain. "I started that way, yes," I replied calmly. "Cleaning rooms, serving breakfast, doing a bit of everything. Your grandfather worked in maintenance." "Must have been hard," Brian commented with genuine empathy in his voice. It was, but I learned a lot. You know what I discovered? I leaned toward him. That true luxury is in the details that no one consciously notices, but that make all the difference in the experience. How so? The boy asked, his eyes lighting up with interest. For example, I pointed to the restaurant wall. See that? Texture. It's not ordinary paint. It's a traditional technique using lime and natural pigments. It breathes, absorbs moisture, creates a healthier atmosphere. Few notice it, but everyone feels it. Brian picked up his camera and photographed the wall, adjusting the focus to capture the texture I had mentioned. Amazing, he murmured, reviewing the photo on the digital display. You can see the micro-reliefs. The light plays differently. Alex huffed, impatient. Brian, enough with this photography obsession. It won't get you anywhere. I saw the boy's smile fade instantly, and something inside me rebelled. How many times had I heard similar things? Hospitality isn't a real career, Nancy. That's work for people without education. Actually, I interrupted, unable to contain myself. Photography can be an extremely promising career. I know photographers who charge more per day than many lawyers do per month. Alex looked at me with amazement, clearly not expecting a contradiction. No offense, Mrs. Nancy, but times have changed. Nowadays, everyone has a camera on their phone. And everyone has a calculator, but not everyone is an accountant, I responded with a polite smile. The talent to capture the extraordinary in the ordinary is rare. Brian looked at me with silent gratitude, and for a moment, I felt that I had finally found a real connection at that table full of strangers who shared my blood. The rest of dinner proceeded between superficial conversations and occasional silences. They talked about stocks, real estate investments, expensive schools for the teenagers. I observed, responded when necessary, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought of Anthony, my husband, and how disappointed he would be to see our children now. Not because of their material success. That was always our goal for them. But because of how money had hardened their hearts, how it had made them so similar to the people who looked down on us when we were young. At the end of dinner, Edward cleared his throat, seeming embarrassed. Everyone, I have an announcement to make. He looked at Patricia, who nodded discreetly. We're having some cash flow problems in the company. Nothing serious, but we need to review the expenses for this trip. Richard frowned. What do you mean exactly? Well, we miscalculated the budget, Edward admitted, avoiding looking anyone in the eye. With the room reservations, meals, and planned activities, we're in the red. A heavy silence fell over the table. Julie was the first to break it. Didn't you say everything was fine with the budget? That's why we booked the most expensive suites. Patricia bit her lip. We had some unexpected issues at the company. A big client canceled a contract last week. I watched everything in silence. It was painful to see my children in that situation, but part of me felt that I needed to let the scene unfold. I needed to understand who they had really become. Alex shook his head, impatient. And now? Do we have to cut half the program? I promised my clients photos from that hot air balloon ride. Actually, Edward hesitated, and then his gaze fell on me. We were wondering if Mom couldn't, help a little. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Not because of the request itself, but because of the way it was made, almost like an obligation, without the slightest embarrassment. Help? I repeated, keeping my voice calm. It's just that you have that retirement income, and we know you don't spend much. Patricia tried to explain, not realizing how offensive her words sounded. It would just be to cover some extras. The excursions, maybe. Brian seemed mortified by the conversation. Megan and Lucas remained absorbed in their phones, apparently immune to the family embarrassment. Caitlin looked at the floor, visibly uncomfortable. I took a deep breath. I could reveal everything at that moment. I could tell them that the retirement they mentioned condescendingly was, in fact, an insignificant monthly withdrawal compared to the dividends my company generated, that I could buy that entire hotel 5 times over if I wanted to. But it wasn't the time. Not yet. Of course I can help, I responded calmly. After all, we're family. The relief was visible on the faces around the table. No one questioned whether I really had the means. No one asked if it would affect my finances. They simply assumed that my obligation was to sacrifice the little they imagined I had. I knew we could count on you, Mom. Richard smiled, now more relaxed. I promise we'll make it up to you when things improve. An empty promise, and we both knew it. After dinner, I declined the invitation for a digestif at the bar and said I would go to bed. In truth, I needed a moment alone to process everything. That was happening. On my way to my modest room, I paused for a moment in the main corridor. Through the panoramic window, I could see the imposing mountains under the starry sky. That landscape never failed to move me, even after so many visits. That's why I chose this place to build Pine Valley. For that feeling of smallness in the face of nature's grandeur, a reminder that we are all part of something greater. Are you okay, Mom? I turned and saw Brian, holding his camera and watching me with genuine concern. Yes, I am, dear. Just admiring the view. Can I take a picture of you, with the landscape in the background? The light is perfect right now. I smiled, touched by the request. Of course you can. He adjusted some settings on the camera and took a few shots. Then he showed me on the digital display. He had captured something I didn't even perceive myself, a mix of strength and melancholy in my gaze, with the majestic mountains in the background. It's beautiful, Grandma. It was the first time anyone had called me Grandma on this trip. Not Mrs. Nancy, not Ma'am, but Grandma. I felt my eyes water. Thank you, Brian. You have a special eye. I'm the only one who thinks so, he shrugged, the insecurity evident in his posture. My dad says I need a real career. And what? Do you think? I asked, genuinely interested. I think. He hesitated, as if he had never really been asked about his own desires. I think I want to tell stories through images, capture moments that people normally don't notice. You know what I think? I gently touched his shoulder. I think you already are a photographer. You don't need anyone's permission to be who you already are. He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his young face. You're different from what I imagined. How so? I don't know. He hesitated. Everyone always talks about you as the aunt who cleaned rooms, as if that was, something shameful, I completed. He nodded, embarrassed. But you don't seem ashamed. You seem strong. And you know more about this hotel than any of us. For a moment, I thought about telling him the truth. There was something about Brian that reminded me of myself in my youth. That sensitivity, that sharp perception that others mistook for weakness. Working in hospitality taught me a lot about life, Brian. About how to treat people. About the value of honest work. I was never ashamed of it. We walked together to the elevator. When the doors opened, there were 2 staff members inside, a housekeeper and a maintenance guy. Both recognized me immediately and almost bowed, but they disguised it when they noticed Brian by my side. Good evening, I greeted as any guest would. Good evening, ma'am, they responded in unison, exchanging quick glances. Brian didn't seem to notice anything strange, but when the doors closed and we were alone again, he commented, "This place is amazing. Everyone really seems to enjoy working here." "That's because they probably do," I replied, with a hint of pride I couldn't hide. A good hotel is one where employees are treated with the same respect as guests. When we reached my floor, I said goodbye to Brian with a sincere hug, the first genuine hug I had received since the beginning of that family reunion. "Good night, Grandma. See you tomorrow at breakfast." "Of course. Sleep well, my dear." I entered my modest room and finally alone allowed the tears to come. They weren't tears of sadness for how I was being treated, but of disappointment in what my children had become, and also, unexpectedly, tears of hope for what I had just found in Brian, a true connection, a sensitive soul like mine. I took my cell phone and sent a message to Paul, the manager. "We need to talk tomorrow morning before breakfast. I have an idea for Saturday's dinner." The response came immediately. "Yes, Mrs. Nancy. I'll be in the office at 6:30 a.m. Is everything okay?" I smiled to myself as I typed, "It will be. It's time for some revelations." "And you? Have you ever been unfairly judged by your own family? What would you do in my place?" I lay on the uncomfortable bed, thinking about how the next day would change everything. Sometimes the most important lessons are the hardest, and it was time for my children to learn one. I woke up before sunrise. I've always had this habit, even on weekends. Anthony used to complain, saying I needed to learn to rest, but after decades of making beds and serving breakfast, my body refused to stay in bed after 5. I took a quick shower and put on linen pants and a simple blouse. No jewelry or elaborate makeup. I wanted that. When the moment came, my children would fully understand the contrast between who they thought I was and who I had really become. The hotel was still asleep when I walked down the silent corridors. Only a few night shift employees and the first morning staff were discreetly circulating, preparing everything for another day. They all greeted me with contained respect, following Paul's instructions to keep my identity secret. I found him in the administrative office behind the reception. Paul was 42, with gray hair at the temples and the impeccable posture of someone who grew up in luxury hospitality. He had been with me for 8 years since I opened the second hotel in Aspen. He was more than a manager. He was my right hand, my professional confidant. "Good morning, Mrs. Nancy." He stood up when I entered, smiling. "How is the experience of staying in your own creation?" "Revealing, Paul," I sighed, sitting in the armchair in front of his desk. "My sons gave me room 145. He widened his eyes, incredulous. "The old staff room? But that's the worst room on the property. We shouldn't even be selling that space yet. It's scheduled for renovation next quarter." "Exactly." I gave a sad smile. Apparently it's what they think I deserve. Paul pressed his lips together, visibly indignant. "Mrs. Nancy, I can transfer you immediately to the Maple Suite. It's vacant." "No, Paul. I'll stay exactly where they put me, at least until the right moment." I told him about the events of the previous day, the embarrassing dinner, the request for money, the way they talked to me. With each detail, I saw his face harden with contained anger. "They have no idea who you are, what you've built, how many people you employ, how many families depend on your businesses." "They really don't," I agreed. "And that's what I want to change tonight." I explained my plan for the special dinner I was organizing. Paul listened attentively, occasionally making notes. "It will be perfect," he smiled when I finished. "Chef Michael will love to be part of this. Just make sure no one reveals anything before it's time. I want to see the expression on their faces when they realize." "Don't worry. I'll be as discreet as always." Before leaving, I asked him to arrange for Brian, my photographer grandson, an exclusive tour of the most photogenic spots on the property with our landscaper. I wanted to give the boy an opportunity to exercise his talent away from his father's judgment. I returned to my room and waited until breakfast time. When I went down again, the family was already gathered in the restaurant, serving themselves from the buffet. "Mom, did you sleep well?" Richard asked, pulling out a chair for me, suddenly attentive after my agreement to help financially. "As well as I could in that bed," I replied honestly. "Did you all rest well in the suites?" "Wonderfully," Patricia exclaimed. "That view at dawn is breathtaking." I smiled. The view from the oak suite was truly spectacular. I myself had chosen the exact position of those windows during construction to capture the sunrise between the mountain peaks. Brian appeared with his camera, looking excited. "Grandma, look at the photos I took at dawn." He showed me impressive images of the morning mist covering the valley. I woke up at 5 to catch that light. Alex rolled his eyes. "Wasting hours of sleep for some photos that nobody will pay to see." Before I could intervene, a staff member approached our table. "Excuse me, Mr. Brian Mendes." Brian looked surprised. "That's me." "We have a special photography tour scheduled for you in half an hour, with our landscaper through the gardens and exclusive trails of the property." The boy's face lit up. "Photography tour, but I didn't book anything like that. It's a courtesy of the hotel, sir, for selected guests with an interest in photography." Alex frowned. "How much does this normally cost?" "It's a premium service, sir. Usually $500 for 2 hours. "And why was my son selected?" he asked, suspicious. The employee, trained by Paul, didn't hesitate. "Our staff noticed the young sir's talent last night. It's part of our philosophy to recognize and encourage artistic talents." Brian looked at me suspicious, but I smiled innocently. It wasn't time yet to reveal my connection to that gift. "Can I go, Dad, please?" Alex, caught off guard by the unusual situation, ended up agreeing. "Go, but don't be late for lunch." As Brian left excitedly, I proposed a walk through town to the adults. "It would be good to get to know Oak Ridge," I said, although I already knew every shop, every restaurant, every corner of that place where I had invested so much. During our walk down Main Street, I observed how my children and their spouses treated the local merchants. Julie's impatience with a saleswoman who took time to wrap a souvenir. Alex's disdainful comment about a craftsman's accent. The way Richard aggressively haggled, as if the small business owners were trying to cheat him. "I can't believe he wanted to charge me $100 for this piece," my oldest son complained, showing a wooden sculpture he had just acquired, for $60. "These tourist places are all the same, trying to take advantage." I took a deep breath, containing the desire to explain the value of that artisanal work, the hours of dedication, the knowledge passed down through generations. "Don't you think his work is worth it?" I asked softly. "Mom, you don't understand how it works. They always inflate prices for tourists." "I do understand, son, more than you can imagine." For lunch, we met Brian at the recommended restaurant. His eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. It was incredible. Mr. Jack took me to places that aren't open to the public. There's a hidden waterfall on the back of the property that isn't even in the hotel brochures. I smiled discreetly. That waterfall was my personal refuge, where I went to think when I needed to make important decisions. I had ordered a secret trail built to it, accessible only to my closest team. And he told me my photos have professional quality, that I could exhibit them. Alex frowned. "Don't get your hopes up, son. Hotel employees are paid to compliment the guests." I saw the sparkle in Brian's eyes dim a little, and I felt a pang in my heart. How many times had my own dreams been diminished by comments like that? "Actually," I intervened, "Mr. Jack is a renowned landscaper with work published in international magazines. If he complimented you, it's because he saw something special." Brian gave me a look of silent gratitude. The afternoon passed with activities programmed by the hotel. I accompanied everyone from a distance, observing the family dynamics. Edwards, twins, remained absorbed in their phones, oblivious to the natural wonders around them. Caitlin seemed genuinely interested in the experience, but her husband was constantly checking emails, as if those family moments were an inconvenience in his busy schedule. Around 5 in the afternoon, I received a message from Paul. Everything was prepared for the special dinner. We returned to the hotel to get ready. In my simple room, I opened a secret small bag I had brought. Inside was a petrol blue Italian silk dress, designer shoes, and a set of discreet but valuable jewelry. For the first time since I arrived, I allowed myself to be who I really was. I pinned my gray hair in an elegant bun, applied a more vibrant lipstick, and put on my favorite perfume, imported from Paris. When I went down to the lobby, Paul was there, formally dressed, talking with my family. Seeing me, he gave a discreet, positive nod. "Mom?" Richard looked me up and down, clearly surprised by my transformation. "You look different." "Thank you, son. I thought the occasion called for something special." "What occasion?" Patricia asked, confused. Paul stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the management of Pine Valley Boutique Hotel, I have the pleasure of inviting you to an exclusive dinner tonight, at the request of the hotel owner who is personally supervising your experience." They all looked at each other, surprised. "The owner?" Alex asked. "Why?" "Let's say she has a special interest in your stay," Paul replied with an enigmatic smile. "If you'll follow me." We were led not to the main restaurant, but to the private dining room reserved for special occasions. The table was impeccably set with our best china, Czech crystal, and arrangements of native flowers. Through the windows, we could see the sun setting behind the mountains, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. "This is very strange," Julie whispered to Richard. "Why would the hotel owner be interested in us?" I sat at the head of the table, the place traditionally reserved for the host. No one seemed to notice the impropriety, assuming that Paul had simply seated us any which way. Chef Michael appeared personally to present the special tasting menu he had prepared. 7 courses that told a story. The story of Pine Valley, the story of the region, subtly intertwined with my own story. "The first course," announced Michael, "is a homage to the humble origins of our founder. A parsnip soup with truffle, representing how simple ingredients can transform into something extraordinary when treated with respect." My children seemed intrigued, but they still hadn't connected the dots. Between courses, Paul told small stories about the hotel, always referring to the visionary founder who had transformed that abandoned land into one of the most exclusive hotels in America. "She started from scratch," he explained, "serving a special red wine that I had personally selected, cleaning rooms in cheap hotels. Together with her husband, she saved every penny to realize her dream of having her own business." I saw Richard and Edward exchange quick glances. The story was beginning to sound familiar. "When her husband passed away," Paul continued, "many thought she would sell everything, that a woman alone couldn't manage a business of that size. But she not only maintained it, she expanded. Today, her chain includes 8 properties across the country, all managed with the same philosophy: excellence without ostentation, luxury with purpose." Brian was the first to understand. His eyes widened and he stared at me, mouth agape. I smiled at him, silently confirming his suspicion. "And the most admirable thing," Paul concluded, "is that she never forgot her roots. She treats every employee, from the highest ranking to the simplest, with the same respect, because she's been on both sides." When the chef personally brought the dessert, a chocolate lava cake with breadfruit sauce, my favorite, Paul finally dropped the bomb. "It's an honor to have the founder and owner of Pine Valley with us tonight. A woman who started by cleaning rooms and built an empire." All eyes turned to the door, expecting the entrance of the mysterious owner. Paul smiled and pointed at me. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Nancy Oliver, founder of the Pine Valley chain." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw the shock, disbelief, and finally understanding spread across the faces of my children and their spouses. Julie went pale. Alex choked on his wine. Richard and Edward looked at me as if they were seeing a ghost. "Mom," Richard finally managed to say, his voice almost a whisper. "You are the owner of this hotel." I smiled calmly, savoring my chocolate lava cake before answering. "Of this one and 7 others. The Pine Valley chain is my creation, built over 20 years brick by brick with the sweat of my labor and your father's vision." But, Edward stammered, "You never said anything. We always thought you worked as a maid? As a cleaner," I completed. "And I did work, son, for many years. Your father and I started from scratch. When he died, I already had enough experience to continue alone. And so I did." Caitlin had tears in her eyes. "Aunt Nancy, why did you hide this from us all these years?" I took a sip of wine, thinking carefully about my answer. "In the beginning, I didn't hide it. I simply didn't boast. I wanted you to be proud of me, for who I was, not for what I had. But over time, I realized that the less you knew, the more clearly I saw who you really were." My sons looked devastated. Patricia was crying silently. Julie stared fixedly at her plate, unable to face me. Alex seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "So room 145, Richard began, "is a former staff room that we're about to renovate," I confirmed. "It shouldn't even be available for reservation yet. Certainly not the room I would offer to my own mother, if I had the chance." Brian, who until then had been observing everything in silence, suddenly began to laugh. A genuine laugh, almost of relief. "This is amazing. My grandmother is a successful businesswoman, and nobody knew. It's like a movie." His enthusiasm broke some of the tension. I smiled at him, grateful for his authentic reaction. "I didn't do this to humiliate you," I clarified, looking directly at my sons. "I did it so you would see, really see, what you've become. How you judge people by what they appear to have, not by who they really are." Edward had tears in his eyes. "Mom, I don't even know what to say. I'm so ashamed." "I don't want you to feel shame. I want you to learn, to remember where you came from, to teach your children the value of honest work, of respect, of humility." One by one, they apologized, words loaded with sincere regret, shock, belated admiration. But I knew that more important than words would be the actions from then on. I spent the next hour telling the complete story. How Anthony and I saved up to buy the first hostel. How I expanded little by little. How I learned every aspect of the business in practice. I talked about the challenges, the sleepless nights, the times we almost gave up. "Your father would be proud of you," I said finally. "But he would be sad to see how material comfort has made you forget the values we tried to instill." I then proposed a new beginning, not based on resentment but on understanding. I offered Richard, who worked in real estate development, a partnership for the expansion of the chain in the Southwest. To Edward, who was facing financial difficulties, I proposed a restructuring of his company with my support. For Caitlin, who had always been interested in hospitality, I offered a training program at our properties. And for Brian, my photographer grandson, the invitation that lit up his face. "I want you to photograph all our properties for the new catalog, with complete creative freedom and professional compensation." Alex, who had previously despised his son's passion for photography, now looked at him with new eyes. "Son, I think I need to learn to see your talent the way your grandmother saw it." The next morning I moved to the Maple Suite, my personal space in the hotel, which I kept reserved for my visits. I invited everyone to get to know the place as they should, not as tourists, but as the owner's family. Brian was the first to appear at my door. He brought a gift, a framed photograph he had taken the night before. It was me in profile, with the mountains in the background and the setting, sun illuminating my face. "Grandma, this is the best photo I've ever taken. It's called Silent Strength." I hugged him, deeply moved. "Thank you, my dear. It's the most meaningful gift I've ever received." In the days that followed, I saw subtle changes in everyone's behavior. The way they treated the staff, the sincere gratitude for small gestures, the genuine interest in my story, my struggles, my achievements. On the night before departure, gathered on the veranda of my suite, observing the stars over the mountains, Richard asked what everyone wanted to know. "Mom, do you forgive us for being so blind?" I smiled, feeling a peace I hadn't experienced in years. "I already have, son. The moment I decided not to reveal who I was, I had already forgiven. I just wanted you to see for yourselves." Edward raised his glass. "A toast to our mother, Nancy Oliver, the most extraordinary woman we know, even when we didn't know who she really was." As the glasses clinked under the starry sky of Oak Ridge, I felt that I had finally found true success, not in the hotels I had built, not in the fortune I had accumulated, but in the renewed bonds with the family I had almost lost. And you, what have you learned from this story? Perhaps that we should never judge someone by appearance or position, that a person's true value isn't in the room they occupy, but in the journey they've traveled and the values they carry. Thank you for making it to the end. If this story touched you in any way, like and share it with someone who needs to hear this.